Amelia Gorman lives in Eureka, where she explores the world with her dogs and foster dogs. Find her fiction in Night Script and Cellar Door. Find her poetry in Vastarian, Palumbric, and Strange Horizons. Her chapbook is available from Interstellar Flight Press. Amelia, it's yours.
Okay, well, I live in California now, as you heard in my bio, but I lived most of my life in Wisconsin and Minnesota, and you never really forget what it's like just seeing, snow piled up to your window, temperatures of -40, like that stays with you. So this story is a little bit about that. Puzzled pieces locked in places. When Meredith woke up that morning, the completed section of her jigsaw puzzle seemed bigger than the night before. It was as if someone had connected 7 or 8 new pieces while she slept. Not many, but enough to leave her feeling unsettled as she lit the wood-burning stove and heated a pot of water for coffee. Splayed out on the card table, an image of a summer scene slowly worked itself into being from the outside in. Actual summer felt a million years away, while snowdrifts piled to the bottom edge of the windows, and the rest blurred in the white-on-white static of the storm. The wind howled, and so did Meredith's dog Kiwi, eager for breakfast of his own. Kiwi was named for his round, brown, and fuzzy look as a puppy, even though he grew into a shaggy, lean, and pointed shepherd. Can it be too cold to snow? Meredith felt in her heart the idea was scientifically inaccurate, but also completely true. Either way, it hadn't been cold enough to gather data or disprove the idea. The ancient thermometer nailed to the outside of the cabin shifted between 20s at night and 30s in the day, while a white curtain fell endlessly from the sky. In the sun, it dripped and splattered a pleasant patter, but on the ground, its elephantine mass resisted melting. Every morning, before rewarding herself with hot, bitterly instant coffee, Meredith kept the small walkway in front of the cabin shoveled. She'd wave at the cardinals overwintering in the window's shallow alcove. Kiwi would romp in the ever-increasing white hills while she scraped and patted the snow to a slick path. Then she'd check the mercury, and if there was a rare morning of calm, admire the pale blue sky and rising sun, until the two were ready to warm themselves. She washed her face in a small basin of heated water at an antique vanity and approached the slow, comfortable day. She found herself in this smoke-gray metal cabin at the center of a pale little island in the center of an indistinguishable Minnesota lake because she was lured by the promise of paying no rent and in fact making money, doing puzzles, filling in crosswords, and reading too much Sinclair Lewis and Laura Ingalls Wilder. All she had to do was watch over the historic Stave Church and its little graveyard on Bald Island. Previously, the Pelican Falls Historical Society had let it empty over winter, but there had been, in their words, disturbances. Raccoons, deer, teenagers on four-wheelers, there were a number of likely and not too threatening culprits. So the society had ferried her over on the white-capped lake in fall. They had offered more firewood than she could use in several years, a fully stocked pantry, and a stack of down comforters as high as the snowbanks outside. There was even a small generator labeled for emergency use only in one of the 3 sheds. Until spring came and the ice went out, or if she went absolutely mad and needed to walk across the lake in winter, she was alone in perfect solitude. Rope unspooled from 2 hooks attached to the front of the cabin and led off in 2 different directions, one to the outhouse and one to the sheds, though she used both sparingly as possible. Each morning lately, she weighed the risk of a bladder infection versus pissing in the snow just out of sight versus making a trip to the actual pit toilet. Overall, though, the Pelican Falls municipal workers had done more than delivered. The cabin had a big, beautiful open living space illuminated by its circular windows when the weather allowed. There was a brilliant kitchen, a cozy loft for sleeping, and stacks of firewood that could easily be replenished from the stock in the sheds. The feathery blankets were like sleeping on a cloud, and the pantry was stocked with both staples and luxuries, including oily anchovies, caviar, hard cheeses, local preserves, and best of all, several bottles of hard, crisp ice wine. She enjoyed reading from the classics, shelves of books, classics, local history, thrift store sci-fi, all crammed side by side. She did puzzles and played solitaire card games. The decks had backs featuring anything from nearby casinos to strange Rorschach blots, and the missing cards only added a challenge. At least not more than the first few times. She slept well each night, spooned up with kiwi. She cooked soups of canned tomato, powdered milk, and bouillon cubes to eat alongside delicacies piled on water crackers. In the evening, she'd drink a glass of ice wine in front of the fireplace with kiwi snoring at her feet, watching tiny white fairies flutter against the panes. The simplicity of life, of putting all sorts of simple things together, of making her bed in the morning and combining a cylindrical can of this and a rectangular tin of that, made the further changes spread across her card table even more noticeable the next morning. Pieces of the puzzle had definitely been added. In this case, the thin slips of cardboard fit seamlessly into each other, had the regular die cut to marry one another and more, but the picture was wrong. Colors that weren't even on the box melded into the spray of lilac bushes in the lower corner. The central gazebo's white walls were now scattered along the edges in perfect alignment. She felt sick, but before she could treat it or feel worse, a thundering rush shook the cabin door. Thud, 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 and a third time. Then precious silence. Then the last burst of pressure snapped the door and splintered too. A small avalanche of snow fell into the main room. Every board flew inward as though pulled by a black hole, when it was actually pushed from behind by a collection of bones, a collection that moved on its own. It bucked like a mechanical bull, trying to throw off bits of itself, and Meredith realized it had been a deer once. Or it was still a single deer, just out of order. Instead of normal antlers, its antlers were held upside down, tines jangling in empty eye sockets. Instead of haunches, it had 2 extra skulls holding its back legs in place, and all its vertebrae grew and shrank in a seamless scale, bulging and declining like a sated snake. The cleanliness of it all gave a different aura of horror than the very zombie movies Meredith liked to watch, with their sloughing flesh and oozing holes. Here, bone shone snow white in the diffused light, and each connection was so perfectly hinged it seemed created by a master architect. It fitted together more gracefully than her own body, more elegantly articulated than any visitor center or natural history museum display. It screamed that this was the way bones were supposed to go, and all other animals were a mistake, puzzles forced together against their will. Life and energy itself came from this new arrangement, similar to how ordinary bodies pumped blood and flexed muscle. And the servant thing, new and stilled with life, was determined to buck and thrash in the small cabin, making its way towards Meredith. It leaped across the room in one sudden burst, and she felt its inverted antler jab her shoulder, where a deep, round pain began to form. Had she been stabbed with no inside-out sharp end, she would be bleeding out, but she only crumpled to her knees with the impact. As she fell, one of her shins landed across the brass fire dog, and a long, thin pain worked its way into her body. A shaft of iron found its way into her hand, while the deer that was a different deer became truly aware of her. It kicked her hard across the face, and she realized instead of hooves, it had giant teeth at the bottom of its ankles. It shuffled to find space for a second kick, but stumbled at the last minute. Kiwi, with all his shepherding instincts, had nipped its other tooth leg and put it off balance. He nipped again and again, and distracted, that destruction-bent void of a brain, allowing Meredith to stand up, fire poker in hand. That's where I'll stop. So if you want to know how it ends, pick up Negative Space from Dark Peninsula Press. Lots of other very good spooky stories in there as well.
Yeah.